Welcome to That Entrepreneur Life, a podcast about entrepreneurship that takes you from idea to launch and beyond. Each week, your hosts, Andrew Lees and Clint McPherson, discuss different business topics aimed at adding value to any entrepreneur's journey.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. I'm Andrew Lees, and I'm here again with my co-host, Clint McPherson. What's on, brother?
Not much, man. I'm just excited, brother. Like always, every time we jump on this thing and click the record button, we got a special guest, and I'm excited to kick it off. So enough about me and you bantering back and forth. But let's just go ahead and kick this thing off by welcoming our special guest, John Corcoran, to the show. How you doing, brother?
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's great to have you here. And before we kind of get into everything, get into our show and ask you a few questions, we think it's a good idea for you to just kind of give a quick intro about yourself and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm one of the two co-founders of Rise 25, and we are a company that helps B2B businesses to use podcasts and content marketing to get ROI, clients, and referrals. And I've been doing my own podcast for about 10 years now. I'm a huge evangelist for the medium. Glad you guys are doing it. I think everyone should do it, and happy to chat about that or anything else in my background.
Very cool.
Awesome,
yeah.
Man. So John, I mean, thanks for being here, brother. Like we said, and with that said, though, let's start. And if you can take us back as an entrepreneur yourself, can you take us back to where all of your, like, from the beginning, where your journey actually started, and what it is about entrepreneurship in particular that you're actually passionate about, brother?
That's a great question. What I'm so passionate about, currently what I love about what we do now is that we've designed a business where we really get to help other people to. Essentially what we do is we help other businesses to connect with and build great relationships using the medium of podcasting and content marketing, essentially using content also as your networking and business development. And so I love that we are able to, create a business that allows us to do that, which feels very purposeful, feels very meaningful, and helps other people, and we get great feedback from it. And that it's also a business that's profitable, and we've got a team of 20 people that are putting food on the table and a roof over their heads, doing this work as well. So for all those reasons, I love it. And I just love the creativity of entrepreneurship, being around entrepreneurs. It really fuels me, and it gives me great energy to hang out with other entrepreneurs who are creating similarly interesting businesses as well.
That's very cool. Yeah. And I mean, it's definitely an energizing kind of group, I think, entrepreneurs in general. We noticed that you're a part of the entrepreneur organization out in San Francisco. And I think that's really, really cool. I was looking at the accelerator program, which looks like you're pretty heavily involved in. And what's that all about?
Yeah, I got involved a couple of years ago. At the time in our business, I felt like we were kind of a little bit stuck. At the end of one of the years, we had worked incredibly hard, and I felt like the results that we had to show for it weren't as great as they should have been. And so we looked around, we looked at business coaches, we looked at different programs, and, you can spend a fortune. You can spend, tens and tens of thousands of dollars on different programs out there. And the EO program, they have two programs. They have EO Accelerator, which is designed for businesses that are $250K in revenue to $1 million. And then there's EO, which is $1 million and above. And so we joined the EO Accelerator program. And it was exactly what we were looking for. And I since joined the board because I really enjoy being part of it. And I also believe that when you deepen your involvement in something, one organization, then you get more out of it. And so it's just been great being part of that organization. And I mean, since that point, I've interviewed Vern Harnish, who's basically the founder of EO, and I've interviewed a bunch of the other people who've been involved with the program for a long time, because I'm a big believer. Again, if you deepen your involvement, if you like an organization, you feel like you share values with it, you feel like you get a lot of value out of it, the more you give into it, the more you're going to get out of it.
Oh, for sure, man.
Yeah.
And I think you brought up a good point, right? Everybody should be podcasting. I mean, and with us doing this and trying to add value to any entrepreneur's journey with our podcast and That Entrepreneur Life, we want to bring like-minded entrepreneurs on and just get that feel. And we're a big believer in everybody should podcast too, especially once we started, right? Because you can see the impact and the purpose behind it and what we're trying to achieve. And from the social media game to repurposing the content from, the voice, the audio version to the video version, man, I think there's a big opportunity that a lot of individuals are missing when they just strictly refine themselves to just the strictly the audio version of it, instead of tapping into the video or tapping into any of the other things like social media that can have a huge part. What is your thoughts on the whole, what we call like the triple threat of podcasting, or the triple threat of what podcasting could do for you?
So we're a bit of contrarians in the industry. So, first of all, our expertise really is in B2B podcasting. So business, if you have a business backing it up and you want to use it as a tool for business development, client acquisition, referral marketing, strategic partnerships, it's really personal and professional development, which also doubles as content marketing for you. But we say that it's really not just about the downloads. It's, in fact, a lot of times people hold themselves up to that kind of mark. If you want to be the next Joe Rogan, good luck to you. Go ahead, try and do that. That's harder and harder these days. But on the other hand, if you have a profitable B2B business and you want to use the podcast as a tool for broadening your network, connecting, deepening relationships with your existing clients and past clients and prospective clients, it's a tremendous tool for that. So that's really our area of expertise. But, podcasting in general is a big blank canvas. And so people get very tempted when they get into it, and they add all kinds of layers into it, which adds complexity, and that slows it down. And I've had, times in my journey where I've almost given up because I made it too complex. So I'm a big believer, keep it simple from the beginning, focus on really using it as a tool to deepen and establish relationships that you wouldn't otherwise. You like this, we're hopping on this call, we're doing this call right now, we're getting to know each other. And when you do that, that's really the best thing you can get out of it. And then, you can do other things as well. But, a lot of times I don't recommend people to spend too much time and energy on tweeting it 100 times a day to their 100 followers.
Exactly.
Creating the perfect image to go on Instagram or whatever. It's like, okay, you know what? You can spend a bunch of time on that, or you can spend a bunch of time interviewing another person, which means another relationship, which is often going to be more profitable and more meaningful for your business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, is creating a network. It's with a podcast, you can, I had not podcasted before this one. And so I wasn't really sure, how cool it could be and how it could be to actually build a network. And when we first started, we were like kind of racking our brains a little bit about who we could have on and who would be, the perfect guest. And it's really taken on a life of its own. And we've had a lot of people reach out to us now who want to be on the show. And so it's such a cool, organic networking tool that I would never have imagined when we first started. So, and it's a lot easier to email somebody like yourself and ask you on the show than just email you about like, hey, you want to talk about stuff one-on-one? And it's just like, yeah, sure. But it just becomes a lot harder to reach people without a platform like a podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I've literally had billionaires and CEOs of publicly traded companies on my show. And it's not like they're going to meet me at a Starbucks, even if we didn't have COVID-19 raging right now, it's not like they're going to meet me at a Starbucks so that I can pick their brain and I can ask questions that are of interest to me. They're way too busy for that, and you see this at high levels. I mean, Reid Hoffman, billionaire founder of LinkedIn, he has a podcast. He's interviewing people on his podcast. Why is he doing it? Because the people that he wants to connect with, they're busy too. And they're not going to carve out time, but they will carve out time because it's for an interview that's going to be published and it's going to be on the web and, all those things. So, those are all reasons to do it. I've been an evangelist for the medium for 10 years since I started doing it. And it's only really in the last couple of years that we transition our business to actually helping people with it. So long before we had any kind of vested interest in it, I was telling everyone that they should do it just for the tremendous benefits of it. And even at this point, we can only help so many businesses. So I'm really more of an evangelist for the medium. Whether people work with us or not, I tell people to do it. They should do it and get involved in it because it's going to reap such tremendous benefits back to your life. But just a comment on, it feels great when you start getting people soliciting you and coming in and making recommendations. There's a lot of agencies out there that will do that. I find that you still have to be disciplined about who you want to interview and have a real clear focus, who's an ideal person for you. Because it is also tempting, and you can get far afield and start interviewing all these other people because, whatever person was president of some organization or CEO of some organization or founded some company, and it gets very tempting. But then eventually you do a bunch of those and you're like, oh God, why am I doing this? What is this? What am I really getting out of this? So you also have to be disciplined and have a clear idea of who are the types of people you want to feature on your show and why.
Love it. Yeah, I definitely agree. We've run into that a couple times. We've actually been surprised, a couple times too, where we're like, oh, we didn't think a particular interview was, we're looking at the guests and like, all right, they've got some interesting experience. But how does this really tie into our podcast? And it somehow it did.
For sure. Some of the best guests I've had on have been people that are unexpected. They're, people that I reached out to, maybe they were a friend of a friend, or I met them at a conference or something, or I looked at them up on LinkedIn and they had an interesting background or story. And maybe they haven't been on a lot of podcasts before, they have an interesting story to tell. One of a client of ours, Alexi Cashin, she ended up starting a podcast with us. But when I interviewed her on my podcast, she hadn't. And she told an amazingly transparent story. She built like a multiple 8-figure business, but they suffered in the course of a year. They had an employee who embezzled from them to the tune of 1.8 million over the course of a year. And she had told this story in person, but not on a podcast before. So she was very transparent in telling that story. And so I think that's an example of how you can have some amazing content, but also it allows you in the process of doing that to deepen that relationship with that particular individual between you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely agree. So, John, you were a speechwriter at the White House, which is a really interesting thing to have on your resume. I think that's really cool. How has that helped you with your content creation in your entrepreneurial career?
How has it helped with content? Well, I think because I started my career in speechwriting, I think about ways of distilling down content and making it simple, because speeches are all about taking complex ideas, making them simple so they're digestible and so that they also get through media channels and that others hear it. And so, entrepreneurship in companies, you're selling products, you're selling services. In politics, you're selling ideas, or you're selling legislative changes, or you're selling larger changes that you want on a public policy level. And so there's a lot of similarities between the two, but between the two, you have to keep it simple because everyone's busy and people just aren't going to digest and take action on too complex ideas. So I think that's really what I learned early on from being involved in speech writing. And I think I bring that to what I do with podcasting these days as well. In addition, the other thing is, I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Didn't have like well-connected parents who got me into a job at the White House. I scraped and crawled, and I had a lot of advantages for sure, but I also worked really hard to network my way up, establish relationships, build my way up, and I think that if I had a podcast then, I would have used it then, because it would have been a tremendous tool for building and deepening relationships to get me in the door. And so now essentially what we do now in the work that we do and in what I do with my podcast is I use it to deepen relationships. So it's kind of the same strategies that I used to land a job as a writer in the White House at 23 years old are the same strategies that I use now and that we show our clients how to use in order to get clients and referrals and strategic partnerships.
Yeah, that's very powerful, man, and interesting, because again, me and Andrew, like he said, when we started this thing off, we just hit the record button and we didn't know what to expect. But coming through this is all about building relationships, right? All these connections that we're building, we're making these awesome connections with everybody that's been on the podcast. And just even in my business as a digital marketing agency, it's something that you see that the stronger you make the relationships with your clients or anybody that has their hand on anything you're doing, whether it's in your business and the people that are working for you, relationships are huge and they go a long way. And it's all about building that up and making sure that is like at the forefront of your thoughts, during the whole journey. And I think as an entrepreneur, it just makes it even stronger. And as me and Andrew were doing some research on Rise 25, John, I mean, we like your mission, right? We like what it stands for, and that you help people grow your B2B sales with podcasting. You mentioned it, you talked about it briefly. Did the inspiration from that, and you might have touched on it already, but if you can go into it a little bit deeper, did the inspiration for that come out of a personal experience with growing a specific B2B business and learning how difficult it can be?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I'm a recovering lawyer today. It's a 12-step program. You got to work your way through it. You're always in recovery, basically, once you've been a lawyer. But, I started when I was practicing law. I had a boutique practice. I was working mostly in Silicon Valley and San Francisco Bay Area. And I just had a good client who came to me one day for a tiny little matter. It was like he wanted me to write a lease so he could rent out a spare bedroom in his house. These days, you'd put it on Airbnb, right? But back then, he had me write this thing. And I researched, I looked him up on LinkedIn. Turns out he was a serial entrepreneur. He'd started a bunch of companies, including some which had gone public and were household names. And I was like, wow, I would love to have this guy as an ongoing client. So I just kind of on a whim, I said, can I have 20 minutes of your time? I'd love to interview you over the phone. I'm going to record it. I'll upload it to the web. I didn't even know how to do that. And I did. And then at the end, he was like, that was a lot of fun. Hey, could you help me with some other legal matters? He helped me with like maybe this thing and this other thing and this other thing. And I was like, well, yeah, sure. Absolutely. That sounds great. And, I'm no dummy. So I'm like, well, I'm going to do that again. And so I just, 500, 600, 700, however many I've lost track, interviews later, I've just continued to do it over and over again. And you can work your way up, not just doing it with your existing clients, but prospective clients and referral partners and strategic partners. And that's where you get some really, truly big leverage, is when you start to use it to get into different organizations. And I've been incredibly privileged. I mean, we've done, webinars for Tony Robbins' company and with Salesforce, and we've had amazing companies that have sponsored events that we put on. And we've had amazing companies like Berkshire Hathaway that have been clients of ours. And so, these opportunities, they don't come on a whim. They don't come from lack of effort. They come from deliberate effort. And the podcast is a way of delivering value to people and also strategically building relationships with the types of people that you want to build relationships with. And so it's a wonderful gift to be able to do it and continue to do it.
Wow. So that was your first interview. Was that your first podcast episode with that client?
That one, I think I ended up publishing it later as an episode, but we didn't even use the term podcast, because it was a long time ago. Right? Yeah, it was just like an interview over the phone. I used freeconferencecall.com, which is still around, I believe. We called into it and I asked some questions, recorded it. And then I think I just uploaded it to my website, I didn't have much of a system to it, know, and it just kind of expanded organically, and started interviewing people in the local community that I admired. My friend Kevin Waldron was one of my first interviews. He was a successful entrepreneur who turned into a business coach. And so I interviewed him, and I started interviewing other podcasters, and I connected with my business partner through podcasting. I've been to people's weddings. I've been on vacations with people. I've been too many meals and great relationships that have come than I can possibly remember. So all kinds of amazing things have come from it.
That's really cool. When along your, in your podcasting journey, at what point did you kind of realize, hey, I can really provide some value to people like Tony Robbins or companies like Salesforce and Berkshire Hathaway? Like, where did that kind of come in? Was that sort of organic as well, or did you reach out to those companies and say, hey, I've got, I can help you with X, Y, Z, and this is how I can do it?
Yeah, it was pretty early on, because from my very first interview, I realized, you could get someone who's normally very busy, has a lot going on. You can, if you approach it right, if you have the right strategy, you can get them to give you a slice of their day, because you're taking interest in them and you're promoting them, and you don't have to have the world's largest audience in order to employ this strategy. A lot of people think, oh, it's too late, but it's not. I mean, I think, today the awareness of podcasting is much larger, and it's easier to download a podcast. I mean, back then it was like you had to download this file to your laptop and then transfer it through a cord over to your iPod and then go, so it wasn't very efficient. Now it's a lot easier. So I think, there's all kinds of easier ways in which it's easier now. But I think very early on, I realized that. I mean, another very early interview, I had, the founder of Lending Tree on. I had one of the co-founders of Open Table. I was just listening to an interview with the founder of Canva, who was talking about the Open Table, which was a model for them. So yeah, I mean, some big, people were willing to give me a slice of their day to be interviewed on the show. So I think I kind of realized it early on that if you do it right, you can get some interesting people and have some great conversations with some people.
Yeah, and I think you may be, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you can't be scared to reach out to the big individuals either. Right. I mean, as an entrepreneur, you got to be used to hearing the no word from time to time, but you also got to be ready when they say yes and execute. Right. So I really think that's encouraging, though, to hear from you specifically. Starting out, you rolled with it and made it happen. And that's what it's all about, man. And I think what it is everybody sitting there waiting for that perfect piece of whatever it is. Right. And you got to know it's never going to be perfect. You just got to make it happen.
I think I've just always had kind of a scrappy, pull it up from your bootstraps kind of attitude with things. It's very easy for people to listen to an interview like this and think, oh, it's easy for him. He's been doing this for a long time. Or it's easy for him because whatever, he worked at the White House, whatever that means. It's very easy for people to make excuses all the time. And, the fact is, none of that makes any difference a lot of the time, and when I started, it didn't make any difference. And, part of this is I think you just kind of have to have that attitude going into these things, and I mean, everyone has ups and downs in their careers. I mean, I worked for a president who was impeached and a governor who was recalled. I mean, I've had all kinds of ups and downs. And so you just have to be okay with that. And when I started the podcast, it was just like, I'm going to be scrappy and I'm going to reach out to different people. And I still continue to this day to do that. I reach out on LinkedIn, and I don't know if they know me from Adam or if they look at my profile or if it makes a difference that I've been doing the podcast for a while. I mean, they're probably judging me against, literally, I know this. I am working on booking an interview with a guy who's got like 6,000 employees. And, I was looking at his LinkedIn and he was on Good Morning America like a couple of weeks ago, so he's probably like, who the hell, like, why do I want to be on this guy's podcast? But it doesn't stop me from trying. There's no harm in trying. The other thing I'll say is that, a lot of times people just go for those big names, or they go for big famous people or whatever, B-list celebrities or internet famous people or, stuff like that. A lot of times, I mean, that's fine to do that. I've had, plenty of people like that on there. I'm still waiting for Gary Vaynerchuk to send me a referral, come on, Gary, any day now. But the thing is, like,
us too.
I mean, the thing is, like, you can get some great people who haven't been a guest on a podcast before. And for them, it's going to make a huge difference. They're going to tell their family and friends and be thrilled about it. And it makes kind of more of a lasting difference. And that often, those people, if you're choosing the right people, oftentimes, one, it's interesting content. And two, it's often going to turn into them becoming a client of yours or them becoming a referral partner or sending referrals, because they're going to be deeply grateful for the experience of doing it if you do it right. So you don't need to just go after those big names. I think a lot of times, having a variety of different people on your podcast is a good idea.
Yeah. And we're getting insight from all kinds of different people, and different backgrounds, musicians, people who've started product companies, service companies, podcasting, like all these different things. So yeah, you never know where some really awesome inspiration is going to come. It's not always from Gary V and, from the big guys. So yeah, I think that's great. Well, what are a few tips or tricks that, because I'm sure we have some people in the audience, listening who would like to who have thought about starting a podcast, or maybe after this episode, they're going to, think a lot, more highly of starting a podcast. What are a couple of tips and tricks you can, give to our audience about starting and growing a podcast, especially from, I guess, starting with getting guests on your show, like we just talked about? What's your strategy for that?
Sure. So, I find a lot of times when people start thinking about this, they spend a dozen hours researching what microphone they're going to buy, or asking questions about what software should I use to record or something like that, and I actually just today got a new microphone. I've been using the same one for 9 years now, but it's starting to get a little glitchy. So I just bought a new one. So it's a decision that you have to make it quickly and move on, because there are much more important pieces. The most important pieces you need to recognize is that how you choose your guests is going to influence your network. So the people that you're going to be connected with in the future. And it's a way of up-leveling your network for sure. So you need to put a lot of thought and intention into that. And if you're finding you're not getting any referrals, you're not getting any clients out of it, it's not leading to good things, it might have something to do with the guest selection. So we take all of our clients, when we work with clients, through a paid process at the outset of the engagement. It's the first thing we do with them is go through and brainstorm 17 different categories that they should be thinking about, not just their existing past clients or referral partners, but also other categories of types of people that they should be thinking about. And for example, I'll give you a couple examples, but for example, you might think about associations in your industry. What are the associations in your industry? You could look at interviewing the executive director or the president of that association, or just go straight through the board of directors for that association in your industry, because a lot of times those board members they're key heavyweight players in different companies that serve volunteer capacity on the board of directors, but they're really well connected. So just going through and interviewing all those people can be incredibly powerful. And then another one to think about is like consulting agencies in your industry that are working with the same type of clientele that you are working with, but aren't competitive, especially if what you do can make the clients that they serve's lives better and easier, improve their life and easier. Like, for example, if you do digital marketing, for example, Clint, right? If you do digital marketing, if you think about like who's a consultant in your industry, where if they were to refer a client to you and you come in and you do digital marketing and you get that client more customers, then they're going to be thrilled. They're going to be happy. They're going to be thriving. The business is going to be thriving more. So they're going to be even more grateful to the person who referred you that business. In addition, that person who referred you, that client, is going to refer all of their clients to you because you did such a bang up job and you made their life easier and you made that person stick around longer as a client for them. So if you think about that, a lot of times that's a good type of person for you to reach out to as well. So, but the number one thing is really mapping out and really brainstorming who are the people that you're going to feature on this podcast, and then go deliberately through those. And then, really only after you exhaust those is when you should start thinking about other solicitations of outside guests from other agencies and things like that. And as long as if you're still disciplined and they still fit within the parameters of who you want to feature on your show.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, so I think what you're talking about is kind of like those organizations that you can reach out to are kind of could be like a symbiotic type relationship. Like I have a product development consulting firm, and I've reached out to intellectual property attorneys and said, hey, do you have anybody come to you who has an idea but hasn't actually developed their product, into something that they can manufacture? And a lot of times they do have a lot of people like that, so they can then send that work to me. I can send it right back. I can work with the attorneys to actually help build stronger claims for their patents. And it kind of works well both ways, so we can refer business back and forth to each other. I can help them, build a stronger patent, and I can also get business from that. So
that's the perfect example. That's a perfect example of someone like that. Yeah. Or you even go one level up, the intellectual property attorneys bar association or section of a bar association, maybe in your local area. So like, for example, when I was practicing law, I revived, it was dormant at the time, the small business section of my local bar association, because I wanted to be known as a lawyer who was working with different businesses. So for you, I would look at your local bars, big bar association in your region, and see if there's an IP lawyers section that you could connect with, and then connect with the president of that chapter and the incoming president and the board members and all the people who are really well plugged in and connected with the others within that organization. And then you also look at conferences for IP attorneys. where they're all gathering. Right now we're not because of coronavirus, but other times we will be. Or even right now, a lot of times those conferences are looking for other ways to engage their people. So like, what if you were to interview the executive director of some, IP lawyers conference? They're not doing very much right now. And then you build a relationship with them, and then they say, hey, this is really cool. I love what you do. Why don't you come in and do an educational training or a webinar or something for our people? And then all of a sudden you're doing a webinar in front of 100, 500, 1,000 IP attorneys who are learning from you. You're an expert for all of them. So that's another way that you could position it as well.
Yeah, it is, man. So John, man, so through your entrepreneur journey and from the highs and the lows that you've experienced, I mean, I know we're still young to a certain degree, right? We're not in our 60s, we're not in our 50s right now, but what has been the most difficult thing about being an entrepreneur for you?
Well, it's definitely, it's definitely not for the faint of heart. There's always going to be ups and downs for sure. I've had highs, I've had lows. It is not as simple as just clocking into a job and you have a specific defined role and you know what you need to do. I mean, it's much more challenging than that, because you're constantly figuring out what should I be focusing on, this or that, and you're thinking about new ideas, but you can't go too far down the road and be exploring new ideas because you have maybe clients that you need to service now. And you're thinking about new innovations. Oh, this is a new way that we could do it. How would that affect things? And should I go after this market instead of this market? There's so many different, strategies that you can go after, and there's only so many hours in the day and you only have so much energy. So you have to be really strategic about going after particular markets and be very careful about rolling out new services or new offerings or new products. In the last couple of years, what's worked best for us is actually stripping out and offering fewer things. When I joined that EO Accelerator program a couple of years ago, we had, I laugh now, look back at it. We basically had like 3 or 4 different business initiatives that we were pursuing. There's no way we could pursue them. It was just too many things at once, and was just playing entrepreneur rather than actually being an entrepreneur. And it's fun and exciting, to talk with your business partner about, this new idea that you have, but ultimately it just didn't yield the same results that we wanted. And so we ended up stripping out a lot of those different things that we were doing. We were doing a lot more events. We scaled those back, fortunately, before coronavirus, and just really focused. And even a year ago, we had basically 2 different services, and we looked at both of them. We decided that we liked working with clients, B2B clients, to develop podcasts and do content marketing with podcasts a lot more than the other service we had. And so we actually stopped doing that one. We, of 2, we narrowed it down to 1, right? And all that narrowing and all that focus has really paid off for us. We're busier than ever now, and we've been growing faster than ever before. So that's a big one with entrepreneurship, is just really distilling down, getting really clear, and eliminating different things that you could do. And even to the point of like, your marketing strategies, getting clear on like, 1 or 2 marketing strategies that work well for you, so you can really hone that in. Because when you're bouncing around from, I'm going to try this Facebook ad strategy to I'm going to try LinkedIn to I'm going to try networking to all these different things, then it's not, you don't get the same results. That's been my experience. So as far as entrepreneurship goes, I think just getting really clear, finding one strategy, following through a handful of strategies and following through on that is going to be the best results.
Love it, man. Yeah. It's kind of like the jack of all trades, master of none type situation. Yeah. And I think a lot of us as entrepreneurs kind of relate to that. There's some days where even when I try to focus on something, I realize how many things that I have to do and how many things that I could do. But really, you just, instead of being like, I could post on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and all these things just for, having a social presence, then I get the podcast, and then, all these different things, you really realize that in order to make it all work, you have to focus and just, at least, to reach the potential of one part of your business, you really kind of owe it to the business to really dive into that, take it as far as you can. And then maybe there's an opportunity to kind of branch off or do something else, add to your portfolio of services. But yeah, I agree. And sometimes, if a client gets to your website and they see that you do like 50 different things, they're kind of like, what are they really good at? So I think it can kind of work against you if you just have way too many things going on. And you should, I definitely agree with just kind of picking something you're really good at and going all in.
Yeah, I experienced this when I was practicing law. There were law firms that took anything, did everything, and no one knew what they stood for. And so, I worked for firms like that, and they didn't get as many referrals because, people didn't know what they stood for, what types of clients to refer to them. And they also wouldn't refer anything out. So they didn't refer anything to anyone else because they wanted every piece of everything, versus then I worked for other firms that were really known for a particular narrow niche, and people called them all the time. They got way more referrals, and anything that was outside of those parameters, then they would refer out. Plus they allowed them to really focus and get really expert in the way that they handled those types of matters. And so I kind of learned it from that. And then same thing with my legal practice. I just narrowed down in a couple of practice areas and then got known for those, and then got a lot more referrals for those particular areas, and you get a lot more confident in it. But it's the same approach I take to entrepreneurship. Don't try and be a master of all these different areas. Just kind of focus on one thing. But then you can expand out from that point. Like we've started offering, we have some clients that they want to do a webinar, and we've done over 500 webinars. So we started helping them with that, or they want to promote it, some of their podcasts more on social media. And initially we didn't do that, but then eventually we started offering that a little bit more. But you have to kind of get really grounded and build your reputation in one area before you can start offering those other things. And we don't do them as standalone separate services. They're only for the clients that we're already doing a podcast for.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's smart. Yeah. You can just,
when you look at it, I mean, as a company and as an entrepreneur though, man, I think we've all been, even starting off, you get stuck in chasing the green, right? Trying to make the money, trying to get that client. And you disregard the red flags that might be in your face, right? Like, you might not need to do that, but we're entrepreneurs and we're like, we got to make that money, right? And you're trying to take it up, man, and it just becomes a hassle and a problem.
I know, right? You see this client coming, you're like, oh, it seems like good money, and then you totally regret it. You're like, oh, why did I do that? And we've had that experience, and a lot of times we look back and we're like, we should have known better. We should have known better. Like we knew from the beginning, just had that kind of gut feeling like this is not a good fit for us. And, it's hard though, when you got to pay the bills and, someone's waving money in your face, you're like, oh man, I could just, help this client. I had that experience with lawyers, when I was practicing law too. Cause, when you're practicing law, most of the clients come to you because there's some breakdown. They have some friction. They got into a fight with someone else. And so they come in and then eventually they turn their ire back at you if you can't solve their problem, which might have been unsolvable to begin with. Doesn't mean that they shouldn't have legal representation. It's just that a lot of times they're going to come back and they're going to redirect their anger back at you. I had that experience, a couple of times as a lawyer, and it's not fun at all, especially if you put a lot of heart and soul into it and then all of a sudden they're angry at you, so it's tough. It's client selection is it's an amazing topic. I don't know, there's a lot of gurus who are expert in every different thing from sales, marketing, and that kind of thing. But I don't know any expert who has said like, I'm the guru for client selection. Like here is the way of doing it, that you should always do it. Here's my system. But if someone did, I would buy 20 copies of their book.
Seriously, that could be a business idea right now.
Sure.
Man, it's got the wheels turning. Cause I've definitely, I actually wrote a little blurb one time. I was so mad at one particular client, and I just wrote this thing that was just like, this is how I'm going to deal with selecting clients from now on. And it was kind of emotional. So it wasn't really something that you could actually use in practice, but it was just kind of like, man, it was basically just like a note to my future self to be like, hey, remember this, and remember to only work with clients who are a good fit. And, these are the red flags to look out for. So that's really interesting. Yeah.
And, and I don't know if you ever get to a point where it's like, you can be, I think you can get more selective. There were definitely times when I was practicing law when I was doing really well and I could be really a lot more selective. And that was really nice. And we've hit a point in our business now with Rise 25 where we can be more selective, which is really nice. It makes a big difference than when you're getting something off the ground. When you're getting something off the ground, you just gotta take whatever you can. You got to keep the lights on you in any way possible. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. You learn. And, even you get, when you have a bad client, you can still get great lessons from them. You can learn from, ways in which you can improve your systems and processes. But you also should take it with a grain of salt because, just because they're complaining really loudly about something doesn't mean that you should completely, tear up your systems and change everything around for this person who's complaining really loudly. I definitely take an 80-20 approach, so I think that there has to be multiple clients who are saying like, this doesn't work for me, or, can you do this a different way? Or we need you to improve this area rather than just, one squeaky wheel. Because if you just make that change for that one squeaky wheel, it might not be in the best interest of the majority of your clients, which is really who you need to be aiming for anyways.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Well, John, as we wrap up this episode, what is one or maybe a couple of quick pieces of advice that you could give our audience to kind of help them on their entrepreneurial journey? Sure.
So I would say, put a premium on building relationships. That has been the number one thing for me. All the opportunities that came for me, whether it was, early on working at DreamWorks, working at the White House, a speaker for Governor of California, client opportunities when I ran my own boutique law firm in Silicon Valley in San Francisco, all these different opportunities came from a relationship. So spend time building relationships. It's critically important. After having done it through content for many years, through writing articles, writing books, you name it, I've come to the conclusion that a podcast is the best way to do it because you're generating content, you're doing business development, you're up-leveling your network all at the same time. And I hope that people will listen to this and see a new vision or a new way of doing it and be inspired to go pursue it. I'd be happy to be a resource, rise25.com, or email me, john@rise25media.com, or reach out on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to be a resource. But yeah, when you're an entrepreneur, it's all about the relationship. So build those relationships. Don't just stay in your bubble in your office or in your spare bedroom or wherever you're working, but proactively build relationships because that's going to really be critical for your business.
Man, that's great, dude. Well, guys, that's a wrap for this episode. And from the both of us, John, we want to thank you, man, for taking the time of your day. Like always, anybody that comes on our show, just to come on and add value to what we're doing here on this podcast, man. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening to That Entrepreneur Life. To learn more about what John is working on, you can check out his website at rise25.com. And if you like what you heard today, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or any other major podcast directory. You can also find us on all the socials and on our website at thatentrepreneurlife.com.
And with that said, we also want to quickly give a special shout out to our family and friends, to include all of our listeners, followers, and subscribers. If you find value in our show, guys, please consider making a donation to show your support. Even just a few dollars helps us keep things moving along and brings value to your entrepreneurial journey. Thanks for continuing to support what we do as entrepreneurs. And don't forget, guys, to join us next week for another episode of That Entrepreneur Life.
Thanks for listening to That Entrepreneur Life podcast. Be sure to visit thatentrepreneurlife.com to join the conversation, access our show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode as we continue to add value. Until next time.